The day my daughter stood in my kitchen and told me the house no longer belonged to me. She checked her phone twice while she said it. That detail still stays with me. The way she glanced down at the screen mid-sentence, like informing her 64-year-old mother she had 6 days to gather 38 years of her life, was something she could slot between calendar reminders. Daddy left everything to me, Mom. The house, the accounts, all of it. I've already been through this with the attorneys. She set her coffee mug in the sink and rinsed it clean, unhurried, the conversation apparently over in her mind. You'll be more comfortable somewhere smaller, honestly. I want to tell you, I argued. That I raised my voice, demanded to see the will, called her bluff right there on the spot. But I didn't. My husband had been dead for 6 weeks, and grief does something strange to your spine. I just stood in the kitchen, where I had made 10,000 breakfasts, and let my daughter rinse her mug and walk out. 4 days later, I was sitting in a Hampton Inn off the highway, with $200 in cash and a box of photographs. That was when I finally understood I needed to stop being the woman who kept quiet. Let me tell you how I went from a motel room with thin walls and thinner towels to sitting across from a federal agent while my daughter's world fell apart around her. Because this story doesn't end the way she planned. Not even close. Sydney and I met in the fall of 1985 at a faculty mixer at the college where I had just started teaching 3rd grade, and he was finishing his residency in orthopedic surgery. He walked over to where I was standing alone near the punch bowl and said, "You look like the only interesting person in this room." It was a ridiculous line. I told him so. We were married 8 months later. For 38 years, Sidney Dixon was the kind of husband who left notes in my coat pockets in winter so I would find them in March. Who remembered that I hated cilantro, even when every restaurant we ever went to put it on everything. Who built his surgical career with a focus that still amazes me, but who always came home for dinner. He developed a spinal implant device in 2009. The kind of thing that doesn't make the news but changes outcomes for thousands of patients who would otherwise spend their lives in chronic pain. The patents generated royalties. Sydney handled all of that, the investments, the accounts, the financial architecture of our life together. You teach children and keep this family grounded, he used to say. Let me handle the spreadsheets. I had believed him. I had been grateful to believe him. He had a stroke on a Tuesday morning in April while he was making coffee. I was upstairs getting dressed. I heard the mug hit the floor. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. I sat on the kitchen floor next to him for 11 minutes, while the 911 dispatcher stayed on the line with me, and I have never felt so small in my entire life. Our daughter Deanna had always been Sydney's, in temperament, in ambition, in the way she could walk into a room and immediately calculate what it was worth to her. She married Ross Price 6 years ago, commercial real estate developer from Charlotte, with a firm handshake and eyes that were always adding something up. They had 2 children, Charlie, who was 9, and Mia, who was 7, and who I adored completely. After the funeral, Deanna came around often. At first, it felt like love. She helped me sort through Sydney's clothes. She made sure the utilities were current. She and Ross came for dinner twice a week and sat at the dining table and talked about practical things, logistics, the future, my future specifically. It was Ross who first brought up the power of attorney. Just so someone can help manage the accounts if you're ever unwell, he explained. Spreading paperwork across the table, Sydney and I had shared for 22 years. You've never had to deal with the financial side of things, Ruby. We want to make sure you're protected. He had a way of saying things that sounded like concern but felt like a closing argument. I signed where they told me to sign. I was 64 years old and 6 weeks into the worst grief of my life, and I trusted my daughter. I signed. I didn't know until much later that the document I signed wasn't the one Ross had described. That my signature had also been copied onto 3 other documents I had never seen. That, By the time I found out, $380,000 had already moved out of accounts I didn't know how to access. The morning Deanna told me the house was hers, she and Ross arrived together with 2 suitcases in the back of their SUV. They weren't visiting, they were moving in. Dad's will is very clear, she said, sliding a document across the kitchen counter toward me. I looked at it without fully reading it. Sidney's signature was at the bottom, notarized, dated 8 months before his death. The attorneys have already confirmed everything. I know this is hard to hear, Mom, but you staying here alone isn't good for anyone. Ross appeared in the doorway behind her. We've already found you a nice place. Senior community over on Marsh Road. Very clean, close to the water. You'd have your own space. My own space, in a facility, while my daughter moved into my home. That night, I packed 2 suitcases and a box of photographs. Deanna stood in the hallway and watched, offering suggestions about what I might not need anymore, the way you help someone pack for a short trip rather than exile them from their own life. She handed me $200 in cash when she walked me to my car. For incidentals, she said. I drove to the Hampton Inn and sat on the edge of the bed and opened my purse to find my reading glasses. And that is when I found the envelope. It had been tucked into the inside zippered pocket, the kind of careful placement that means someone wanted it hidden but findable. Sidney's handwriting on the front. Just my name. Ruby. I hadn't put it there. Deanna had gone through my purse 2 weeks after the funeral, ostensibly looking for the car insurance card. She must have missed it. I opened it slowly. My darling Ruby, if you're reading this without me there to explain, then I wasn't given the time to do this right. There is a man named Avery Haverford. His office is on Bay Street, downtown. He has handled my affairs for 12 years, and he has everything you need. Go to him first before you do anything else. Trust him the way you trusted me. I'm sorry I didn't tell you more sooner. I was always so certain I had more time. I love you more than I ever found the words to say correctly. Sid. I sat with that letter until 2 in the morning. Then I slept. And for the first time since April, I slept through the night. Avery Haverford's office was on the 2nd floor of a brick building overlooking the water, a place that smelled of old wood and legal paper and serious decisions. He was a slight man in his mid-60s with a bow tie and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and when his assistant told him Ruby Dixon was in the waiting room without an appointment, he came out immediately. Mrs. Dixon, he said, taking both my hands, I've been trying to reach you for 3 weeks. Your daughter kept telling me you were traveling. Traveling. That single word told me everything I needed to understand about how carefully this had been planned. He walked me into his office and set a thick folder on the desk between us. Were you aware, he said, choosing his words with care, that Sidney updated his will 14 months ago? I had not been told there was anything to be aware of. He turned the folder toward me. I, Sidney James Dixon, being of sound mind, do hereby leave to my beloved wife, Ruby Ann Dixon, our primary residence, all personal property and furnishings therein, and 70% of all financial holdings, investments and accumulated royalties from patent assets, totaling approximately $18 million. I had to read the number 3 times. To our daughter Deanna, he had written, I leave a trust of $8 million. To be distributed beginning at age 50, provided she has treated her mother with dignity and respect in the period following my death. Should that condition not be met, the trust reverts entirely to Ruby. I looked up at Avery. The document Deanna showed you was not filed with this office, he said quietly. Sidney never signed it. We've had a handwriting analyst confirm that. He paused. What your daughter has done constitutes fraud, Ruby, elder financial abuse, multiple felonies. The room didn't spin the way I expected it to. It went very quiet. She also had Ross forge a power of attorney, I said. They've already moved money out of the accounts. He knew. He had already spoken to the bank. Within 2 hours, every account was frozen. The credit cards Deanna and Ross had activated against what they believed was their inheritance were declined before dinner time. The utility transfers they had filed on my home were suspended pending ownership verification. My phone rang at 5:47 that evening, Deanna's name on the screen. "Mom," her voice was tight, "there's some kind of mistake with the accounts. Everything's showing as frozen." "Hello, Deanna," I said. "I'm sitting in Avery Haverford's office. You remember him, of course. Daddy's attorney. The one who tried to reach you 3 times while you were telling him I was traveling." A long silence. "You forged your father's signature on a will," I continued. "You had a power of attorney fabricated using a copy of my signature from another document. You moved $380,000 out of accounts that weren't yours, and you drove your 64-year-old mother to a motel with $200 in cash and called it incidentals." I paused. Did I miss anything? Her voice changed then. The control slipped. "You don't understand what you're getting into. There are things about Dad's finances you don't know. If you push this and it all comes out, the IRS, Mom, the government. Do you understand what I'm saying? We were trying to protect you. We were protecting all of us." She spent the next 20 minutes in escalating and increasingly desperate detail, describing what she said she and Ross had discovered in Sydney's files after the funeral. A Medicare billing scheme, she claimed. Inflated claims, misdirected reimbursements, money moved through the patent accounts to obscure the source. They had been trying to quietly take control of the assets before federal investigators noticed. They had been protecting the family. "We were always going to take care of you," she said. "We had a plan." "A plan that involved forging my signature and putting me in a motel," I said. She didn't have an answer for that. That night, Avery and I sat in his office until 9. He took Deanna's allegations seriously, because that is what a careful attorney does. He made one call before we left. The following morning, we had a meeting we had not anticipated. Her name was Agent Carmen Torres, IRS Criminal Investigation Division. She was in her early 40s, with short dark hair and a handshake that meant business, and she had been in contact with Avery the previous evening. She arrived at his office at 9 a.m., carrying a briefcase and an expression that told me she had encountered this kind of accusation before. "Mrs. Dixon," she said after reviewing Avery's summary, "I'd like to share something with you." She opened the briefcase and removed a single folder. "Your husband came to this division in the fall of 2021. He had identified a Medicare billing irregularity at the hospital network, where he held surgical privileges, not his own billing, but a scheme being operated by the hospital's billing department and 2 of his colleagues. He brought us documentation he had collected over 8 months. His cooperation led to a federal investigation that resulted in 7 indictments and the recovery of approximately $4 million in fraudulent claims." I stared at her. "The financial patterns your daughter presented as evidence of your husband's wrongdoing," Agent Torres continued, "are records from that cooperation period. Sydney maintained duplicate financial records as directed to track the movement of funds he was documenting for us. They were never evidence of his own illegal activity." Her voice was precise and unhurried. "Your husband was the reason those people were caught, Mrs. Dixon. Every dollar in his estate has been reviewed and cleared by this division. There is no exposure. There never was." I thought about Sydney leaving notes in my coat pockets, about the quiet way he had always carried more than he let on. He had been gathering evidence for 8 months while sitting across from me at dinner, asking about my day, refilling my wine glass, telling me not to worry about the spreadsheets. He had carried it alone because he was the kind of man who believed the right thing had to be done quietly if it was going to be done at all. I pressed my hands flat on the table to keep them steady. "What happens to my daughter now?" I asked, given that her threat has no foundation to stand on. Agent Torres looked at me with something close to sympathy. "That's between you and your attorney." Avery filed the emergency injunction that afternoon to remove Deanna and Ross from my property. Detective Amara Osi, a real woman in a Navy blazer who took elder financial abuse cases with the gravity they deserved, executed it herself the following morning. I stood on the sidewalk and watched. Deanna came to the door in yesterday's clothes, her hair pulled back, eyes already red. Ross appeared behind her, already on his phone. When they saw the detective's badge and the court order, Ross went very still. Deanna looked past Detective Osi and found my face. "Mom," she said. I had rehearsed this moment through the night. I had thought I might say something precisely calibrated, the kind of line you remember. Instead, I stood there for a moment in the morning air and said, "I'd like my house back, please." They were given 1 hour for personal items. Detective Osi stayed the full time. When their car pulled out of the driveway, Ross driving too fast, Deanna staring straight ahead at something I couldn't see, I walked back inside alone. The master bedroom still smelled of the cedar closet organizer Sydney had installed the year we moved in. They hadn't gotten around to changing that yet. I stood in the doorway for a long time before I walked in. The plea negotiations took 4 months. Ross received 18 months in federal custody and lost his real estate licensing. Deanna received a suspended sentence with 3 years of probation, full restitution, and mandatory community service. The $8 million trust, which had already reverted to me from the moment she told me I would be more comfortable somewhere smaller, remained mine. I did not push for the maximum, not because she deserved mercy I hadn't yet found, but because Charlie and Mia were 9 and 7 and had not done anything wrong. I wanted their mother present and humbled rather than absent entirely. Some calculations are made in the heart, not in the law. Before the sentencing was finalized, Avery gave me one final thing Sydney had left in his files. A video recorded 11 months before his death on the laptop he kept in his home office. Avery had held on to it, waiting for the moment to be right. I watched it alone at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening, with a glass of wine I barely touched. Sydney appeared on screen in his reading chair, still healthy, still himself, his hair combed the way he always combed it for anything that felt official, parted on the left. "Ruby," he said, and his voice did what it always did, just settled something in my chest that nothing else could reach. "If Avery is showing you this, then things went sideways in ways I hoped they wouldn't. I want to say 3 things. First, the money is clean, every last dollar. I need you to know that without any hesitation. Second, I know you've probably been wondering about our daughter. I have been too, for longer than I let on. I watched the way she talked over you at dinner. The way she calculated everything, including us, including me. I updated the will because I wasn't certain what she would do when I was gone, and I wanted you protected before I found out. I hoped I was wrong about her. I was not wrong about you. I never was. Third, and most important, you spent 38 years making our life livable, making it warm, making it the kind of place a person wants to return to. I know I said thank you. I hope I said it enough. But I don't think I ever said it the way I meant it, which is that none of the rest of it, the career, the house, the patents, any of it, meant what it meant without you beside me. You were always the point. Everything else was just the rest. Don't be too quiet about what you need anymore, Ruby. You've earned the right to be loud." He looked directly into the camera for a moment. Then he leaned forward, and the screen went dark. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time after. Then I washed my wine glass, went upstairs, and slept in the center of my own bed for the first time since April. 6 months later, the Sidney Dixon Foundation awarded its first scholarship to a nursing student at the university where I used to teach. The scholarship is for students interested in medical ethics and patient advocacy. It seemed right. It seemed like him. I repainted the living room a color Sidney would have called a lot. a deep terracotta that turns amber in the afternoon light. I bought the reading chair I had wanted for years and never created space for, because it would have meant rearranging furniture Sydney preferred. I joined a pottery class on Thursday mornings with women I didn't know in September, and cannot imagine my week without now. And then one Saturday in October, my doorbell rang. I looked through the window before answering, out of a habit I've developed. It was Mia, standing on the front porch in her fall jacket, backpack still on her shoulders, shifting from foot to foot the way she does when she has done something she is proud of and slightly afraid of at the same time. I opened the door. "Hi, Grandma," she said. "I took the bus." She was 7 years old. She had taken 2 buses and walked 4 blocks, and she was standing on my porch like she had just climbed something. "Does your mother know you're here?" I asked. She studied the welcome mat. "She knows I went to my friend's house." That's not what I asked. A pause. "No, ma'am." I brought her inside, poured apple juice into the good glasses, and called Deanna immediately. It was the first time we had spoken since the sentencing. The conversation was brief and careful, the way conversations are between people who have hurt each other in ways that do not come clean quickly. Deanna's voice shook once, at the very beginning when she said my name. I let the silence hold for just a moment before I answered. "She's safe," I said. "Come get her when you're ready." While we waited, Mia sat at the kitchen counter and told me about her teacher, about a book she was halfway through, about how Charlie had lost a tooth last week and cried about it even though he was 9, which she found embarrassing on his behalf. She looked around at the terracotta walls with the frank, unfiltered assessment that only children can pull off. "It's nicer now," she said. I thought so too. Mom showed us pictures of when she was little. You were in all of them. I looked at her small, serious face. "She cries sometimes," Mia added, with the straightforward reporting of a child who hasn't yet learned to edit herself. "When she looks at them." Before Deanna arrived, Mia pulled a folded piece of paper from her backpack. She had drawn it herself at school during free period, she told me, and colored it carefully. 3 figures holding hands in front of a house, a taller woman with gray-streaked hair, a shorter woman, and between them a small girl in a red jacket. Above the house she had drawn a yellow shape that was either a sun or a star, and inside it, in careful printed letters, "Grandpa watching." I held that drawing for a long time. Deanna arrived 20 minutes later. She looked different from how I expected. Quieter, smaller, in a way that had nothing to do with her physical size, the kind of smallness that comes from having been taken all the way down and having to figure out what's still there underneath. She stood at the threshold and didn't come inside. "Thank you," she said, "for calling me." I nodded. "Mom," she started. "Not today," I said, "but maybe eventually." She looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from her in years. Something unguarded, something that caused her to let me see. Then she nodded and reached out her hand, and Mia took it, and the 2 of them walked down the porch steps together. I watched until the car turned the corner. Then I went back inside, to the terracotta walls and the reading chair, and the kitchen that still, some mornings, if the light is right and I'm standing in just the right spot, smells faintly of cedar and old coffee. Sydney was right. I had earned the right to be loud about what I needed. I was still learning what that looked like. But I had time, and my name on every account, and a foundation I was building in the name of a man who had loved me quietly for 38 years and spent his last years proving it in ways I hadn't even known to look for. Not finished, still figuring it out, but starting. I have found, this past year, that starting is enough.